Henderson.
Here.
Hudson.
Here.
May. Neuenburn. Washington. Williams. You have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Today we're going to be listening to a bill presented by Senator Lincoln Hough, the chair of the committee. Senator, please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senator Lincoln Hough representing the 30th Senatorial District. Appreciate the time in front of the committee this morning and the participation from about half of our committee. Senate Bill 586 is, and I know you guys hear this all the time, but it is actually a fairly simple bill. It simply creates the federal road fund and then deposits the federal road funds that right now are transferred from the federal government to us and put in the state road fund into a separate fund. And the purpose of this is that I think, unless I'm incorrect, I think our state road fund is the only out of roughly 800 funds in our state government. It's the only fund that constitutionally stands appropriated without any legislative action. Okay, so the intent of this legislation is to give the 197 members of the legislature just a little bit of oversight over the billions of dollars that come into the state from the federal government. Now, you'll probably hear that this will create some sort of uncertainty or something like that with contracting purposes. I don't necessarily agree with that because we have a number of other entities that have dedicated funds. Like you could take the Conservation Department, for instance. They've got a dedicated 8-cent sales tax that does not stand appropriated, and I've never had an issue with the Conservation Department having problems getting their appropriation authority through the legislature. And I think, like I said, I think this just gives a little bit of oversight to the duly elected members of this body when we're talking about the, like I said, billions of federal dollars that are flowing into the state. So with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm more than happy to answer any questions at this time. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any questions of the senator? Senator Neuenburn.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator.
So just a few questions for you. As I was trying to unpack this, I don't know as much about MoDOT probably as you do. So I'm going to ask just very basic questions. How would this impact the STIP if we were to pass this?
Well, as long as the appropriation authority is granted by the legislature, it would have no impact whatsoever.
Okay. But right now, all of our regional planning commissions come together. There's a lot of input from folks in developing the STIP, right? And then MoDOT goes through and prioritizes those more or less.
Yeah, I think they work with the regional planning organizations around the state, sure.
Yep. So now all of those projects are kind of planned out over time, right? And so are you saying each of those individual projects then would have to come before the legislature or not?
No, I mean, in fact, no, the complete opposite, Senator.
Okay.
This body and our counterparts in the House could grant complete authority and or transfer all of the federal money back to the state road fund that then stands constitutionally appropriated. I see virtually no impact on the 5-year rolling STIP that we have with the stakeholders around the state.
Okay, so then share with me what would be different? What would need to come before the General Assembly if this were to pass?
The only thing that would be different is that the authority to allocate, spend, appropriate the money would lie with the legislature and not constitutionally with the state road fund, which, like I said in my opening remarks, is... And
so that would just be through the appropriations process?
Sure, it's exactly like every other spending authority plan that we have with every other department in the state.
So in terms of when we start looking at that House bill, how would that look moving forward if this were to pass?
Well, I think there would be then a federal road fund that would have authorization granted by the legislature, just like every other fund with any amount of money in it that is authorized by the legislature to then be spent by the department.
Okay. So we wouldn't have individual projects laid out?
I mean, theoretically you could. You wouldn't have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the senator? Seeing none. We're ready for people to testify in favor of Senate Bill 586. We have anybody here to testify in favor of Senate Bill 586? Anyone to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 586? anyone to testify for informational purposes only on Senate Bill 586? Please come forward. Have you already done your form, Ed?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Please begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I just wanted to kind of testify for information and how the process currently works. I think there's probably not a lot of knowledge about the complexity here that happens. So literally, any given time, MoDOT has 400 active construction projects. Probably cities and counties that this would affect have somewhere around 200 consultant contracts that operate to do the work to get ready for the construction program, probably are in the hundreds. And then work that MoDOT does with our forces that are federally eligible for reimbursement also draw down on the federal funds. So what happens is a lot of people think there's a big chunk of federal money that comes to Missouri and then we draw against it. What happens is that every time a contractor makes a request of us to pay the bill, we make a request to the federal government to say, here's an authorized payment. We pay the money out of the road fund. So we go at risk, pay the money. The contractor gives us their invoice, and then we ask for the reimbursement of federal funds. So that literally happens like right now when construction season is cranked up, probably several hundred times a week. We ask for that drawdown. We get the 80% of the federal funds. It comes back into the road fund and replenishes the road fund so we can kind of keep that ball rolling. That's not what most people think. Most people think there's a bunch of federal money that gets granted to Missouri and we draw against it. So highly complicated process. Certainly by adding this kind of shortstop of the money to the federal fund would create another set of complexities that would take time, effort, and money to navigate. Not impossible, but certainly would cost, people and money to do. I think the other things that would be a little bit problematic is the state road fund is the fund that backs the state bonding or the MoDOT bonding. And so I think this would probably trigger a review of the bond rating for the commission, which would certainly make borrowing more expensive for the current bonds we have and any that we would do in the future. Whether that impacts the state's bond rating is probably questionable. Don't know that, but certainly would increase our cost to borrow, which means less money, less projects. And then the other piece that I think is pretty important is while we can probably weather that time frame that it would take to do the work around to get through this federal program, the cities and counties that do this, when they pay at risk, they probably don't have the capacity to take on that risk of time before they get reimbursed. So while we have the critical mass to do that, a city and county are probably on the margins when they do this, and so that would create probably some issues for them. So those would be the things that I think would be a little problematic. And then the last one would be, certainly we do a lot of projects that go over one fiscal year. So a lot of our big projects are 2, 3, some of these big ones we're doing now are even 4-year projects. And certainly our contractors are really good at pricing risk. So right now the road fund gives them the certainty that they know that they're going to get paid and that they're going to get, a confidence level that they're going to get reimbursed. So when we do this on a yearly appropriation, certainly that puts risk on them. They're good at pricing risk, and I'm pretty sure this would result in some pricing increase from our contracting community. So those are the things I'd like just to highlight about this.
And When we look through the budget, help me remember how I identify the Fed funds, because it seems like that there's already broken out when we look at stuff that MoDOT, in the past years I've been here, we still get to identify the federal funds that are expected to come into the state, right?
We very early on in our process do a financial forecast to determine how much money we put out for contracting. And so what we do is we do a financial forecast of what we think the federal share is going to be. And it's pretty consistent. You know, federal bills are 5 years long usually. And so once we figure that out, we set the size of the STIP and go about the planning process that Senator Nurnberg was talking about. But then once it comes into the road fund, then we kind of do the accounting to make sure that we put the 80% on the right projects and go about it that way. But yeah, we know how much is federally funded.
Yeah, because me looking at this, the way that I look at it, it is something that already happens within the department. This would be the first time that we discussed it with some level of oversight from it as a legislator. I think that those things, like any other department that touches federal funds, that it's in there, you're budgeting for those in the future. So having those pulled out, that process is already done. I would guess with the Department of Transportation, it's already done. It's just a fact in the past we've not approved those. But with both of you sitting there, because the senator was involved in the I-29 project, trying to get that pulled off the ground, and was involved in bonding, and probably at your position at that time were involved in that. That was the only question that I had serving on Mosier's board, and as I become a little bit smarter about how these bonding projects work, what both of you thought impact that really might have with bonding, this bill, with bonding any kind of project in future for MoDOT. It seems like you're saying it might raise the cost of bonding slightly, and you probably agree that it could possibly raise that, and it might possibly
I
not
don't agree
at
that
all.
the cost of bonding money associated with where
With where
money is deposited has any effect, and I find a little bit of an interesting take that triggering a review of MoDOT's policies according to like their financials and having a bond overview would trigger any sort of increase unless something was going on that was wrong, in which case you're kind of making my case as to why the legislature should have oversight of the billions of dollars that they're spending.
Okay. Any other questions? Senator Crawford?
This is a little bit off topic, but not really. Do you see any changes coming down from the federal government as to how your funding happens? Since there are so many changes happening there now, do you have any indication about what that's going to look like?
Well, what I can tell you for right now, the formula funds that are flowing from the federal government to us have not been interrupted. So whether that's cities and counties, whether that's us, there's a lot of nervousness about whether that is going to continue. But for right now, formula federal funds seem to be uninterrupted.
I was just thinking along the lines of like block grants and things like that. Would they do things like that? And in that case, I think we might want some oversight to do if it came down in a bunch like that, I guess, so to speak.
I think the bigger concern right now is discretionary grants, which MoDOT doesn't get. In the past administration really didn't get many of those. So certainly cities and counties did, and a lot of those have been frozen. But the formula money has not been affected. The bill that we're currently working under expires in about 14 months. And so then I think we have a whole new set of things to worry about. I would say that though formula federal funding is probably going to continue, I can't say that for sure, but that is going to be a subject that we have to really probably double down over the next year on, because the next federal bill will set the table for us federally for the next 5 years, potentially.
Okay, thank you for that.
Senator Serpoy?
Thank you. Good morning. First of all, I'm not sure information is the right way to coin this, but anyway. I'm just curious, first of all, today's the first time I've really looked at this bill. Why hasn't somebody come to my office to help me understand this from the department or somewhere? Pros, cons, nobody has come to my office. I've talked to a couple of the members. This is the first time they've really looked at it. And this is kind of a complicated, big deal, and it just seems to me the department would be over here helping us work through this.
Certainly, we can do that.
Okay, well, and this fund, okay, you said that this fund potentially hundreds of times a week is sending requests to the feds or sending money out. So if we do this appropriation, will we just put a big number there and let you all run it like you do now? Or, because we're not going to be looking at this every week or every month or anything else. So how will that work?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, thank you.
Senator Washington.
I just had a quick question because I came in late, but I thought I heard you say if we do this, that the contractors will go up. Can you explain to me why they, because that would be price gouging, why they would start doing that if the funds are still going to flow through us, right? So they still know that the money is there. It's just they have a better idea. It seems to me that there would be a better idea to know what goes to our federal assisted roads and what goes to our state roads.
Yeah, I think the basics is that uncertainty brings price increase, and so if year to year there's a question of whether this fund gets appropriated or not, or at what level or what projects, then contractors that are bidding on year-to-year contracts doesn't matter because they would have that certainty. But for things like a Chester River Bridge and I-70 project that are a 3-year, 4-year horizon.
I guess I'm confused because we're not talking about like, doesn't seem to me that we're talking about like extra funds. We're just talking about, in accounting terms, what bucket we're putting them in. That, if I make $10,000 a month, and I've been commingling it all together in my one account, even though half of it comes from Social Security, half of it comes from my retirement. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that all I'm doing now is I'm going to put my $5,000 in my Social Security bucket and make that an account, and then $5,000 in my retirement bucket and make that an account. I still have the same money. It's just now I'm better able to allocate or see what exactly the money from each bucket is spent from. Is that not the right analogy?
Well, I think it's the question of does it get appropriated next year at the same rate as it did this year, and does it have?
But wouldn't that be the same if we keep it the way it is?
No, because right now the road fund stands appropriated. Exactly.
But don't we appropriate that every year?
No.
No. So this is the entire, Senator, if I could just jump in real quick. And I appreciate Senator Sirpoy perhaps pointing out that this is probably more testimony in a different regard than strictly informational ed, but I appreciate it. This is, in your terms, this is strictly an accounting mechanism and an oversight mechanism for the 197 members of the legislature to have a little bit of oversight over the billions of dollars that are flowing into the state from the federal government. And the state road fund is the only constitutionally appropriated fund in state government. We do not appropriate that. And the reason I brought up the Conservation Department earlier, they have a dedicated 8th cent sales tax statewide, a little over $100 million annual budget. But we do still give them the authority to spend their money. We do not give, under the State Road Fund, MoDOT, the authority to spend their money. Their money is constitutionally appropriated, and we have zero oversight whatsoever out of the State Road Fund.
So like when they used some money that we thought would go to one thing and they used it for something else, we couldn't do anything.
Yeah, we have absolutely no authority over the State Road Fund. We cannot, and I think Senator Bean is actually a perfect example, because when we had MoDOT in front of the committee when we were doing our budget meetings, he brought up 67 or 57, the road that we put, I think we put, what did we put, Ed? We put $60 million of general revenue and then tried to, under Senator Bean's direction, tried to appropriate the other $90 million out of the State Road Fund. And what you heard from the department is, yeah, that's not our plan, so we're not doing that. So a $150 million road project that went from, I believe, Poplar Bluff down to the Arkansas state line is actually not going to get done the way the legislature had intended it to do. And so now we're kind of back to the drawing board saying, how can we get that other $90 million? And I'm sure the department would be more than happy for us just to ship them another $90 million of general revenue, but I don't see this committee doing that after the after the way that the state road fund was purposefully allocated last year by the legislature and then not utilized by the department. Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Is there anyone else to testify for informational purposes only?
Or in opposition.
Seeing none. Senator, any
No,
closing remarks?
No, I think I appreciate the time of the committee, and like I said, I think the intent of this legislation is just to provide a small bit of oversight by the elected members of the House and the Senate, and in no way, in my opinion, would it detract contractors from bidding on projects. In fact, this is the committee that put the projects together that the department now brags about that are happening over multi-year time frames all over the state. So I appreciate the time of the committee and be happy to work with you all and move this thing forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you.